The rain came hard that night. Grant pulled his jacket tighter and hurried across the muddy path toward his cottage. He had spent the whole day fixing broken fences at the edge of the settlement, and his hands were sore and his boots were soaked. All he wanted was a warm bowl of soup and a quiet night by the fire. He was almost at his door when he heard it. A sound, low and desperate, coming from the trees. Grant stopped walking. He stood still in the rain and listened. The sound came again. It was not an animal he recognized. It was deeper than that. Heavier. Like something large trying very hard to be quiet and failing. He turned toward the trees. 2 drakes stood at the edge of the forest. They were big. Their dark scales caught the little light that spilled from Grant's window, and their eyes glowed a pale amber in the dark. They were not aggressive. They were not threatening. They looked scared. Grant had lived near the settlement long enough to know drakes. He fixed their fences too sometimes. Repaired the stone walls near their nesting grounds. They had never spoken to him much, but they had never caused him trouble either. He respected them. They tolerated him. That was the arrangement. But these 2 drakes were different tonight. The female stepped forward first. She was shaking. Not from the cold. From something else. Her amber eyes were wide and wet, and she held something against her chest with both front limbs. Something small. Something wrapped in a piece of dark cloth. Grant stood very still. She walked toward him slowly. Her partner stayed close behind her, his head low, his eyes scanning the trees behind them like something was following. Like they were running from something Grant could not see. Grant did not move. He let her come. She stopped just a few steps away from him. Then she looked down at what she was holding and then she looked up at Grant. Her eyes said something her mouth could not. They were full of fear and full of trust at the same time, which was the strangest thing Grant had ever seen. She held the bundle out toward him. Grant looked at it. The cloth moved. Something inside it shifted and made a soft, broken sound. A sound that was tired and small and wrong. He reached out slowly. She placed the bundle into his hands. It was a hatchling. Tiny. Barely the size of a large cat. Its scales were a pale silver gray, and they were dry when they should have been wet and warm when they should have been cool. The little creature opened its eyes for just a moment. They were gold. Then they closed again. Its breathing was shallow and fast. Grant looked up at the female drake. She pressed one clawed hand briefly to his chest. Just once. Then she stepped back. Her partner said something low in the drake tongue. Grant did not understand the words, but he understood the sound. It was a goodbye. The kind you say when you do not know if you will come back. Then they both turned and ran into the trees. Grant stood in the rain with the hatchling in his arms. He looked at the forest. It was dark and loud with rain and wind. He looked down at the small creature against his chest. It made that broken little sound again. Grant went inside. He did not know what to do. He had never held a hatchling before. He did not know their needs or their habits or what they ate when they were sick. He knew fences. He knew tools. He knew how to fix things made of wood and stone and metal. He did not know how to fix this. But he sat down near the fire and kept the hatchling close to the warmth because that seemed like the right thing to do. The little creature was shivering. Grant unwrapped the dark cloth and checked for injuries. No cuts. No wounds. Just fever. The kind that burned quietly and steadily and would not break on its own. He remembered something his grandmother had told him once about fever. Keep them warm. Keep them calm. Do not let them feel alone. He stayed. He heated water and dipped a clean cloth in it and pressed it gently against the hatchling's neck where the scales were thinnest. The creature flinched at first, then relaxed. Grant did it again. And again. He talked quietly while he worked. Nothing important. Just words to fill the silence. He told the hatchling about his day. About the broken fences. About the rain. About the soup he never got to eat. Around midnight the hatchling opened its eyes again. Gold. Steady. Looking directly at Grant. Grant stopped talking. The hatchling looked at him for a long moment. Then it made a new sound. Still small. Still tired. But different from before. Softer. Like something settling. Grant let out a slow breath. He did not sleep that night. Every time he started to drift off, he woke himself back up to check. He kept the fire going. He kept the cloth cool and damp. He kept talking in a low voice whenever the hatchling seemed restless. By the time the gray light of morning came through the window, the fever had dropped a little. Not gone. But less. The hatchling was still breathing. Still warm. Still alive. Grant sat back in his chair and looked at the tiny silver creature curled against his side, one small clawed foot resting on his knee like it belonged there. He did not know who this hatchling was. He did not know why those 2 drakes had chosen him, of all people. He did not know what came next. but the little creature was alive. And Grant decided that for now that was enough. 3 days passed before Babloo opened his eyes properly. That was what Grant started calling him. Babloo. The hatchling had no name that Grant knew of, and calling him nothing felt wrong. So Grant gave him a name, quietly on the second morning, while pressing a warm cloth to the little creature's side. It suited him somehow. Small and round and soft-sounding. Like the hatchling himself. By the 4th day the fever was gone. By the 5th day Babloo was sitting up on his own. Grant had set up a corner of the cottage for him. An old wooden crate lined with the warmest blanket he owned. A low clay bowl for water. Another for food. He had no idea what hatchlings ate, so he started simple. Warm broth made from whatever he had. Soft pieces of cooked meat. Small portions offered slowly with patience. Babloo ate everything. He was small but he was hungry, and that hunger felt like a good sign to Grant. Sick things did not eat. Dying things did not eat. This little creature finished every bowl and then looked up at Grant with those gold eyes like he was waiting for more. Grant always gave him more. The routine built itself naturally over the first week. Grant woke early, started the fire, prepared Babloo's morning broth, and sat with him while he ate. Then he did his work around the settlement through the day, always returning by midday to check. Babloo waited by the window each time. Grant could see the small silver shape sitting there as he walked up the path, watching for him. It made something quiet happen in his chest every time. The Drake elders noticed within the first week. Grant was not surprised. The settlement was not large, and a human raising a hatchling was not something that happened every day. Or ever, as far as anyone knew. He saw them sometimes when he walked Babloo at dawn, which had become part of the morning routine because Babloo refused to stay inside once the sun came up. 2 or 3 elder drakes standing at a distance, watching. They never came closer. They never spoke. Grant did not wave or call out to them. He just kept walking with Babloo trotting at his side, small legs moving fast to keep up with Grant's longer steps. Babloo grew fast. Not in size, not yet, but in strength. His scales, which had been dull and dry during the fever, started to shine. Pale silver with a faint blue edge that caught the morning light and made him look like something out of an old story. His eyes were brighter. His movements were quicker. He started climbing things he should not have been able to climb. The old wooden chair by the fire. The stack of supply crates near the wall. The low stone fence outside the cottage. Grant would find him in impossible places and simply lift him down without a word. Babloo always looked slightly offended. The elder drakes began coming closer. Not to Grant. To observe Babloo. They would stand at the edge of the path in the mornings, 3 or 4 of them, large and ancient and very still, watching the hatchling move and play and chase the small birds that landed near the cottage door. Their expressions were unreadable. Their eyes tracked every small movement Babloo made. One morning a very old female elder moved closer than the others had ever come. She was enormous. Dark green scales faded with age. Eyes the color of deep amber. She stood about 20 feet away and watched Babloo for a long time. Babloo noticed her. He stopped chasing the birds and stood still, looking back at her. Then he walked toward Grant and pressed himself against Grant's leg. Not out of fear. Grant understood the difference by now. It was something else. Like he was making a statement. Like he was showing the elders something. The old female looked at Grant. Grant met her eyes and gave a small, respectful nod. She turned and walked away without a word. But she came back the next morning. And the morning after that. What the elders were watching, Grant did not fully understand yet. He only knew that Babloo was doing things hatchlings apparently did not do at his age. He knew this because one of the younger Drake settlers, a quiet one named Finn who sometimes helped Grant with fence work, told him one afternoon while they were replacing posts along the eastern wall. Finn said that hatchlings Babloo's age did not climb. Did not run with that kind of speed. Did not hold eye contact with elder drakes. Did not respond to voice patterns the way Babloo responded to Grant's. Grant asked what that meant. Finn said he did not know exactly. But it meant something. That evening Grant sat by the fire with Babloo curled in his lap, which had become the end-of-day habit. The hatchling was warm and heavy and breathing slowly. Grant ran a hand along his back the way he had learned Babloo liked, following the line of scales from neck to tail. Babloo made a low sound. Steady and deep for something so small. Grant looked down at him. He thought about the 2 drakes in the rain. The way the female had pressed her hand to his chest before she left. The way her partner had spoken those words Grant could not understand. He thought about Finn's words. Means something. He looked at the little silver creature sleeping in his lap, scales catching the firelight, breathing calm and even and strong. Grant did not know what was coming. He did not know what the elders saw when they watched. He did not know what Babloo carried in those small silver scales. But he knew this hatchling was not ordinary. And he knew, without quite deciding it, that he would be there when the truth of it finally came out. It started with the fire. Grant had a small hearth in the corner of his cottage, nothing special, just a place to keep warm and cook simple meals. He had lit it every evening for years without anything unusual happening. But 3 weeks after Babloo arrived, the fire started doing something different. It responded to the hatchling. Not in a dangerous way. Not in a way that caused any harm. But when Babloo sat near the hearth and went still, the flames would shift. They would move slowly, like something was breathing through them. Shapes would form for just a moment and then dissolve. A wing. A long neck. Mountains that did not exist anywhere Grant had ever been. An open sky filled with creatures flying in formation. Grant watched it happen the first time and thought he was tired and imagining things. The second time he sat up straight and paid close attention. The third time he went and found Finn. Finn came to the cottage the next evening and sat quietly in the corner while Grant lit the fire and Babloo settled near it. They waited. Babloo went still in the way he sometimes did, that deep focused quiet that looked like sleep but was not sleep. And then the flames moved. Finn did not speak for a long time. Then he stood up slowly and said he needed to bring someone. He came back the following morning with 2 Drake scholars. They were older than Finn, serious and careful in the way they moved, carrying worn leather cases filled with old books and rolled documents. They introduced themselves to Grant with polite nods and then asked if they could observe Babloo. Grant said yes. The scholars sat in the cottage for most of that day. They watched Babloo eat and move and climb and rest. They watched him near the fire. They made quiet notes in small books. They spoke to each other in low voices in the Drake tongue, and Grant understood none of it, but he could read the expressions on their faces well enough. They were not confused. They were stunned. By late afternoon, one of the scholars, a tall older male with dark red scales and careful eyes, asked Grant if he could ask some questions. Grant put down his tools and sat across from him. The scholar asked how long the flame visions had been happening. Grant told him about 3 weeks. The scholar asked if they happened when Grant was not present. Grant said he did not know. He had not tested it. The scholar nodded slowly and asked Grant to step outside for a short while. Grant went outside and waited by the fence. Through the window he could see the scholars watching the fire with Babloo sitting near it. Nothing happened. The flames burned normally. Flat and plain and still. After a few minutes the scholar came to the door and asked Grant to come back in. Grant stepped back inside. Within 2 minutes the fire shifted again. The scholars looked at each other. Something passed between them that Grant could not name. That evening the older scholar sat down across from Grant with one of his old books open on the table. He spoke slowly and clearly so Grant would follow. He explained that Babloo was not an ordinary hatchling. His parents were not ordinary drakes. They belonged to an ancient line called the Lineage Keepers. It was a bloodline that went back further than most drake settlements had records for. Lineage Keepers carried something inside them that regular drakes did not. Flame memories. The accumulated experiences and knowledge of every ancestor in the line, stored not in the mind but in the blood and the scale, passing from parent to hatchling at birth. The problem was that flame memories needed something to unlock them. In the old days there had always been a keeper bond. A chosen individual, not always a drake, who carried a particular quality of stillness and warmth and presence that allowed a young lineage hatchling to feel safe enough to open. Without that bond the memories stayed locked. The hatchling grew up without access to what it carried. The bloodline continued but the knowledge inside it slowly went dark over generations. Babloo's bloodline had been going dark for a long time. Grant listened carefully and said nothing. The scholar turned a page in his book. He showed Grant an old page covered in careful writing and small illustrations. One of the illustrations showed a human figure standing beside a young drake. The human had one hand resting on the drake's back. Simple and plain. The scholar said that Babloo's parents had spent years searching for the right person. Not a warrior. Not a scholar. Not someone powerful or important. Someone with the particular quality the old text described. Patience. Gentleness. The ability to be present without demanding anything. They had watched Grant for 2 years before that stormy night. Grant stared at the page. He thought about the times he had worked near the settlement. The mornings he had spent quietly replacing stones along the nesting walls. The way he had always moved carefully and spoken softly and never once entered drake territory without being invited. He had not been performing anything. He had just been himself. But someone had been watching. And they had decided he was the one. The scholar closed the book gently and looked at Grant. He said that Grant had not been chosen because he was extraordinary. He had been chosen because he was steady. Because Babloo needed someone who would simply stay. Who would show up every morning and every evening without fail and do the small quiet work of being present. Grant looked over at Babloo, who was curled near the fire, eyes half open, watching Grant the way he always watched him. Gold eyes. Calm and certain. Like he had always known exactly where he was supposed to be. Grant sat with that for a long time. Then he got up and prepared the evening broth. Because that was what came next. And he was steady enough to do it. The summons came on a quiet morning. Grant was outside replacing a loose board on the cottage fence when Finn arrived. Finn did not say much. He handed Grant a small folded piece of dark paper sealed with something that looked like old wax pressed with a scale pattern. Then he stepped back and waited. Grant opened it. The writing inside was in simple common language, which told him it had been written for him specifically. It said that the elder council of the settlement requested his presence at the council stone that evening at sunset. It said he should bring the hatchling. It did not say please. Grant folded the paper carefully and put it in his pocket. He looked at Finn. Finn's expression was hard to read. Not unfriendly. But serious in a way that made Grant's stomach feel heavy. Grant asked if he should be worried. Finn was quiet for a moment. Then he said that the elder council had not summoned a human to the council stone in living memory. He said Grant should be respectful and honest and should not try to sound more important than he was. Grant almost smiled at that last part. He had never tried to sound important in his life. He spent the rest of the day working quietly. Babloo followed him from task to task the way he always did, close to Grant's feet, occasionally climbing something he should not have been climbing and waiting to be lifted down. Grant let the routine settle him. The familiar weight of tools in his hands. The sound of wood and stone. The small warmth of Babloo nearby. By late afternoon he put his tools away and washed up. He did not dress differently. He had no fine clothes and no armor and nothing that would make him look like anything other than what he was. A handyman in worn work clothes with calloused hands and mud still faint on his boots despite his efforts. He picked up Babloo, who settled immediately against his chest with one small clawed foot gripping Grant's jacket, and he walked toward the council stone. The council stone was at the center of the settlement. Grant had seen it from a distance but never approached it. It was a wide flat circle of ancient stone, pale gray and very smooth, surrounded by tall carved pillars. 5 elder drakes sat around it when Grant arrived. They were the largest drakes he had ever seen up close. Old in a way that showed not in weakness but in weight. In the way they held themselves. In the depth of their eyes. The amber-eyed elder who had watched Babloo every morning was among them. She sat at the far end and said nothing when Grant entered the circle. She simply watched. Grant stopped at the center of the stone and stood still. One of the elders spoke. He was enormous, dark gray scales, eyes the color of old copper. His voice was low and even and careful in the common language. He said that the council had observed the hatchling for several weeks. He said the scholars had made their report. He said the council understood what Babloo was and what Babloo carried. Then he looked directly at Grant and said that what the council did not yet understand was why a human should be trusted with something this old and this important. He asked Grant to explain himself. The circle was completely silent. Grant looked at the elder. Then he looked down at Babloo against his chest. Babloo was awake, gold eyes open, perfectly calm. Grant looked back up. He did not try to make himself sound brave or wise. He spoke the way he always spoke. Plain and slow and without decoration. He said that on the first night he kept the fire going because the hatchling was cold. He said he heated water and used a clean cloth because the fever needed to come down and that was the only thing he knew to do. He said he stayed awake because he did not want the hatchling to wake up alone in a strange place and be frightened. He said that in the mornings he made broth because Babloo needed to eat and a creature that is eating is a creature that is trying to live. He said he walked with him at dawn because Babloo wanted to see the morning and it cost Grant nothing to walk. He said he watched the fire visions and did not run from them because Babloo was not something to run from. He said he went to find Finn because he wanted to understand, not because he was afraid. He said he was not a scholar or a warrior or anyone with a title. He said he was a man who showed up. Every morning and every evening. With warm food and clean water and enough quiet to let a small creature feel safe. He stopped talking. The silence in the circle was very deep. None of the elders moved. The old copper-eyed elder was looking at Grant with an expression Grant could not fully name. Not suspicion anymore. Something else. Something that was working its way slowly towards something Grant did not have a word for. Then Babloo moved. He lifted his small head from Grant's chest. He straightened himself slowly, the way Grant had seen him do near the fire when the memories came. That deep focused stillness. And then very quietly Babloo opened his mouth. A flame came out. Small. Pale gold with a thin edge of blue. Perfectly steady. It did not flicker or spit. It burned clean and calm in the open air for a long moment. Then it went out. Babloo settled back against Grant's chest and closed his eyes. The amber-eyed elder at the far end of the circle let out a long slow breath. She looked at the copper-eyed elder. He looked back at her. Then he looked at Grant. And for the first time since Grant had entered the circle, the elder's expression was completely clear. It was recognition. They came back on a morning when the sky was very clear. Grant was at the fence again, the same fence he had been repairing the day the summons arrived, finishing the last board he had never gotten around to. Babloo was sitting on top of the completed section, watching the tree line the way he sometimes did in the early hours, gold eyes steady and unblinking. Grant heard them before he saw them. A deep sound in the air. Not thunder. Something more deliberate than that. A rhythm. Like very large wings moving through still air. He set down his hammer and stood up straight and looked toward the forest. They came out of the tree line together. The same two drakes from that stormy night. The female first, her dark scales catching the morning light. Her partner just behind her, moving with a steadiness that had not been there when Grant last saw them. They had been frightened then. Running. Desperate. Now they walked with their heads up and their eyes forward, and something settled and solid in the way they carried themselves. They were not running anymore. They had won whatever they had gone to fight. Babloo saw them. He went completely still on top of the fence for one long moment. Then he made a sound Grant had never heard from him before. High and clear and sharp, like a bell struck cleanly. He launched himself off the fence with more speed than his small legs should have been capable of and ran across the grass toward his parents. Grant watched. The female drake dropped low immediately, her head coming down to the ground, and Babloo ran straight into her. She made a low sound and pressed her nose against him and breathed him in slowly. Her partner came close and did the same. The three of them were still for a long moment, pressed together in the morning light. Grant stayed by the fence and gave them the time. He looked away toward the settlement and busied himself picking up his tools and setting them in the box. He was not part of that moment. He understood that. Some things belonged only to the people they belonged to, and a mother and father finding their hatchling alive and well after a long time away was one of those things. He let them have it completely. After a while he heard footsteps in the grass behind him. He turned around. The female drake was standing a few feet away. Babloo was with her, sitting at her feet but leaning sideways against her leg in a way that looked very deliberate. Like he was connecting two things. Like he was making sure both sides knew he belonged to both. The female looked at Grant. Her amber eyes moved over him slowly. Not with suspicion. With something much more careful than that. She was reading him the way Grant had learned to read a piece of wood before working it. Looking for the truth of what it was made of. Then she looked down at Babloo. Babloo looked up at her. Something passed between them. Grant could not hear it. It was not in any language he knew. But it was real and it was clear, and when it was done the female looked back at Grant with her expression completely changed. Her partner came to stand beside her. He was taller than she was and his scales were a darker shade, almost black in certain light. He looked at Grant for a long moment without speaking. Then he spoke. His common language was slow and deliberate but clear. He said that they had returned to find their hatchling not just alive but awakened. He said that what Babloo was now, at his age, was something that should not have been possible without decades of careful guidance from within the bloodline. He said the scholars had told them everything. The flame visions. The trial. The steady flame Babloo had breathed before the Elder Council. He stopped for a moment. Then he said that they had spent 2 years watching Grant before that stormy night. He said they had not been certain. No one could be certain with something like this. They had only hoped they had seen truly. He said that they had. The female stepped forward then. She reached into the fold of her wing and drew out something small. A band of dark metal, thin and simple, with a small scale pressed into it. Not decorative. Purposeful. The kind of thing made to mean something specific and last a very long time. She held it out toward Grant. Grant looked at it and then at her. Her partner explained quietly. He said that in the old language of the lineage keepers there was a title that had existed since the first bonds were recorded. Flame brother. It did not mean servant. It did not mean guardian in the hired sense. It meant someone woven into the line. Someone whose presence was part of what the bloodline needed to survive and grow. He said no human had ever held it. He said Grant had earned it in every small and quiet way that it could be earned. Grant looked at the band in her outstretched claws. He looked at Babloo sitting between them, watching him with those gold eyes that had first opened and looked at him in a cold rainy cottage in the middle of a long night. He thought about what his life had been before that night. Quiet. Simple. Enough but only just. He thought about every morning since. Every bowl of broth. Every dawn walk. Every fire vision. Every moment of sitting still in the dark so a small creature would not feel alone. He reached out and took the band. He did not make a speech. He simply nodded once, the way he nodded when something was settled and real and did not need more words around it. The female exhaled slowly. Her partner dipped his head. Then Babloo walked over to Grant and sat beside his boot. He looked up at him for a moment. Then he lifted his small tail and wrapped it carefully around Grant's wrist, just above the band. Come. Certain. The way you hold on to something you have always known was yours. Grant looked down at him. The morning was still and bright and full of possibility. And for the first time in a very long time, Grant felt like exactly where he was standing was exactly where he was supposed to be.